Good afternoon, everyone. My name is McKenna Christie, Assistant Editor at PCT, and I want to welcome everyone to today's Business Booster webinar, Selling Pest Control in the 21st Century, sponsored by Applause. Today, we are going to be hearing from Patrick Quigley, President and owner of Sales Training by Design. Patrick will discuss how to combine time-tested sales fundamentals with today's cutting-edge tools, including artificial intelligence and digital automation. I will now tell you a little bit more about Patrick. He has been in the pest control industry for more than 4 decades and spent 15 years with Western Termite and Pest Control in New Jersey, working from the ground up, where he became regional sales manager. He was then promoted to regional director of sales for Residex Corporation. After 5 successful years with Residex, Patrick started his consulting firm, Sales Training by Design, which he has been leading for over 20 years. Following Patrick's presentation, we'll hear from Andy Williamson of Applause. Andy is the director of sales at Applause, which helps pest control companies improve technician performance and customer experience by connecting technician metrics, customer feedback, and instant rewards. And before we officially get started, I want to pass along 2 housekeeping notes. First, the views expressed in presentations made during this webinar are those of the speakers and not necessarily the PCT Media Group or its parent company, GIE Media. Presentations during the webinar or the participation of vendors during the webinar do not constitute an endorsement of the vendor or speaker's views, products, or services. And secondly, this webinar is interactive and we encourage everyone to ask our speakers questions throughout. You can do so by typing them into the Q&A interface at the bottom of your screen. We'll hold all questions until the end. And at this time, I will pass things over to Patrick.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you folks today. We're going to be talking about selling pest control in the 21st century. My name is Patrick Quigley, and again, thank Applause for sponsoring this program. I want to first start with some initial thoughts on AI. I think we all know that we're in the very early stages of AI technology. We probably use AI at a fraction of its capabilities as of right now, and learning more and more every day, every month, every year. AI will evolve rapidly over the next 3 to 5 years. I do not believe it will replace certain sales functions in our business, residentially, also commercially. There are certain calls that come into our office that AI is handling at this point in some of our businesses, changing service dates, rescheduling appointments, listening to calls, and responding accordingly to some of you folks. And there's some great software out there to help you engage in those activities. First things first, what is AI? A smart assistant that can read, write, and think through information quickly. AI won't replace B2B, business to business, or business to consumer sales. However, it can help us get tasks done quickly. And when I say replace, there are some sales that we will have offered to the consumer that AI could potentially set up and schedule a first inspection, but there's still going to need to be some level of sales opportunity for whether it be a technician, a selling technician, or a salesperson to get that person on board. Examples of some of the tasks: saves time on repetitive tasks. There's intelligent autoresponders for after sales are made, where there could be some potential follow-up after maybe a second or third human follow-up process. It can write follow-up emails for you. And I would definitely recommend that you proofread these. I have read many AI information emails and autoresponders that you can tell are from AI versus from a person. So make sure you're proofreading them so it sounds like you and not AI. It can create proposals or actions from your notes. So if you're doing detailed notes during an inspection, whether it be residentially or commercially, it certainly can help you create recommendations, observations based on your notes. Again, I would proofread all proposals. If you're going to have AI create your proposals, I would definitely Make sure that these proposals are from you and not from AI. It will help you organize your pipeline and remind you of tasks that you may forget, much like CRM, warning to all sales reps. Many of the platforms that we are using in the industry today have some component of a CRM in the back, and some are better than others. I'm not going to use any names, but if you are a sales rep that is not using the CRM, I would highly encourage you to do some checkup from the neck up, because that CRM process will absolutely help you. And AI is also involved with the CRMs that are out there today. So if you're from the old school and you're used to using business cards and write notes on the back, my friend John, make sure that you are learning how to use the CRM systems that are available from your company. Basically, AI removes much of the paperwork so that you can spend more time selling. And I think that human interaction will still continue to be here for years to come. How to blend proven sales principles with modern technology and AI tools. Technology does not replace sales fundamentals, it only amplifies them. Sales principles haven't changed in decades. They say it's the oldest profession in the world. Um, and we had there's like I tell many of my clients and participants in my sales training that nothing moves in America till a salesperson sells it. I think that's going to be the way it is moving forward as well. Um, the principles, discovery before presentation, and that's asking a lot of good questions to find out what the customer's looking for, what they want, what their expectations are. And that discovery happens before we develop either an inspection or a presentation. Trust before transaction. I think these are principles that will, again, never change. The client must trust the person that they're talking to before that transaction will take place. And consistency before scale. And that means making sure that you have processes down before you duplicate those processes, whether it being selling technicians or outside salespeople. What has changed? I think the change is the speed of information that clients receive today in comparison to many years ago. The internet is a foe, but also it can really bring some information to the consumer much faster. Buyers' expectations. I know my expectations from a residential perspective or a commercial perspective are a little bit different, but especially in the residential arena, the expectation is to get things done and have them done professionally. The volume of touch points required to stay relevant in a buyer's journey, and that buyer's journey residentially is from when they originally have a problem to what they're seeing, how they're going about calling you, and then all the processes that take place between one, two, or even sometimes three pest control companies before that person makes a decision to purchase. And then the relevant buyer's journey after a proposal's done with follow-up. AI and technology should support preparation, and that's research on, especially in the commercial arena, or research demographically or regionally with pest pressures or what have you. And then also call planning, consistency on follow-up, reminders, and workflows from when a call comes in to where does it go? Does it go right to a technician? Does it go to a selling technician? Does it go to a salesperson? After the salesperson, what happens in that workflow to get that service taken care of, whether that be residentially or commercially. The visibility, your pipelines, your activity tracking to make sure that you can track the activity, especially if you have workflows that are moving from your marketing to your phone calls to your outside salespeople. Especially on the commercial side of the business with tracking activities prior to somebody even authorizing you to do an inspection and potentially providing them with a proposal. that needs to be tracked. You could sometimes in a commercial arena, it could take 18 months to 2 years to land an account that might be one of the biggest accounts you've ever sold. And it can also be a small one as well, but tracking it from the original conversation or touch point is critically important. And that also is used with your CRM programs. AI can also help reps prepare smarter for calls. Again, researching accounts, researching areas where we may already currently service multiple houses in a neighborhood. Be good to use those as a reference. Creating better questions for the clientele, the B2B or B2C. Staying organized without relying on memory. Um, we we have certain questions that we should be asking consumers, both residentially and commercially, that are very powerful to help you move your prospect to a client, and that will help organize. AI can help you organize those. Sales fundamentals, close deals, technology makes sure that we don't lose them. So we'll still have the grasp of the sales fundamentals, but we could be using AI to help us, again, spend more time selling and less time behind on the keyboard. Ways to enhance customer engagement and trust in an increasingly digital marketplace. Digital tools create access, but trust still requires intention. So trust still requires human intention. Customers are more informed, but also more skeptical today. Sales engagement today is about responsiveness, how fast you answer the call, how fast you can get somebody out there, how fast you can identify what is happening and creating some level of solution and for the client, and then ultimately taking care of that client. Relevance to the situation that client is in, and how you can help them with that issue that they may be having. Overall professionalism, how we look, how we sound, how we interact with the client, how we deliver our service, how we provide exceptional customer service to the client to keep them for many, many years. Trust is built in small moments, how quickly you follow up. If you're going to run a lead, leave an estimate, wait a week. I would say that the customer has less trust in your abilities to serve them. So having a follow-up system, as we'll talk through a little bit later, is critically important for the numbers that you want to put on the books on a weekly, monthly basis. Whether you remember details and how clearly you explain the service process. These small moments make a difference to the buyer, that you're able to, again, remember details of a structure, which AI cannot do, because AI is not at that structure. Making sure that you follow up according to what the client's requests are and what your process is, and then how you clearly explain that service. What AI tools, digital tools do well: faster response times, better documentation. Again, I would absolutely recommend making sure that AI is not writing your documentation without you proofreading it to make sure it sounds like you versus sounding like AI. Clear communication expectations. And that is, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's only one hole we can shut. We got to listen twice as much as we talk when we deal with clients. And that way we can hear from them what their expectations are of what they want us to do for them. So that clear communication is listening and making sure that we're communicating both ways. Where salespeople still win, reading emotions. I'm not sure that AI can do that as well as we can with reading the emotions through body language, and how people are speaking to us. understanding the structure of a property or a facility in which in the commercial arena, understanding the ins and outs of different portions of a house or different portions of a commercial business, explaining why we do, not just what we do, and making sure the customer understands the whys of what we do and how we apply and why we apply the way we do, and whether it's a crack and crevice, it's an extra application, it's using the Webster or what have you to provide a service. And that's why we do it and not just what we do. Reassuring customers during uncertainty. And this is the objections that customers will have where you're able to watch the body language, listen to that objection, and be able to handle that, whether it's an emotional objection or it's an objection that you can handle just verbally. Pest management, specific angle. Pest control is an emotional decision for a homeowner. Pest control is emotional for a homeowner. It's fear, it's embarrassment, there's urgency, there's stress, there's why me. There's a lot of emotions that go into when especially the business to consumer, where that consumer has a pest pressure at their house that they didn't recognize and didn't know they've had, and then all of a sudden, bam, it pops up. There's a lot of emotions that go on. Technology should support empathy, not replace it. There's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is you cry with them. Empathy is you understand what they feel and you're able to respond accordingly. I don't know that AI can do that. And if AI can produce sympathy, well, I think we're all in trouble at some point, but it supports empathy. Customers don't trust technology. They trust people who use technology well. Techniques to improve sales productivity and follow-up efficacy. Most sales are lost to inconsistency, not competition. Sales productivity is not about working harder, it's working smarter. It's about cleaner sales processes, fewer drop balls or fumbles, better follow-up discipline. And we talked about follow-up previously. I think this is one piece that many of us drop the ball on, is having a pure, clear cut follow-up process, whether that would be for a customer who has a pest pressure, and that pest pressure, let's hypothetically say it's ants. A week later, they have ants again, or 14 days later, those ants are back. We do a second service, and 10 or 14 days later, those same ants are back in the same areas. What's your follow-up system to provide quality service, exceptional customer service, even when there's a pest pressure? And the same thing with follow-up with the sales arena. What is the follow-up process after leaving a proposal or providing a proposal to a client? The fortune is in the follow-up, but only if it happens. Common productivity killers, relying on your memory. No defined follow-up process. Again, critical to the sales arena, whether that follow-up, and I would say that follow-up system must happen from human to human on at least the first two, if not three follow-ups, and then maybe you can turn it into an AI follow-up system. No visibility for managers. Every lead answers three questions. One, who owns it? Two, what's next? And three, when is it happening? Follow-up systems should remind, not be a pest, and guide, not overwhelm. Meaning, if you're using autoresponders, and someone has not made a decision as of right now, I would not bombard them with a daily follow-up system. I would make sure there was something that was very comfortable from your company's perspective, but yet keeping you involved with that buyer's decision journey after the proposal is made. Techniques to improve sales productivity and follow-up, management tie-ins, track everything. And when I say track everything, I mean most of us will, some of us know all of the numbers. You know the numbers of what you spend in advertising, you know how many leads you get, you divide the two, you know what your cost per lead is. Some of us get very granular on what we use to track our cost per lead. Some of us just take what we spend in marketing in our SEO and say, okay, that divided by the number of leads. But there's other things you got to take into consideration. But tracking leads, tracking the leads that come in, tracking the proposals that go out, tracking dollar value of proposals, and so on and so forth. So make sure that AI is allowing you or is helping you in tracking everything because what gets tracked gets coached. So if I have a sales rep that is producing or estimating $30,000 in a period of time and they're closing $20,000 in that period of time, that means there's $10,000 sitting out on the table. And I can only coach on the 10,000 if I know that number. And why is that 10,000 sitting out there? Is it because we were late? Was it because we didn't do a great job at the kitchen table? We fumbled. Um, we didn't follow up, but I can coach based on what I find based on tracking. And then what gets coached gets improved. So if the $10,000 and 4,000 of it was because we didn't do a follow-up system, well, we can create follow-up systems to help that sales rep pull $2,000 or $3,000 out of that 10 so that their number is not 20,000, it's 23 or 24,000 from the 30,000 proposed in a given period of time. And I do know somebody can help you do that. Um, Great salespeople don't forget less. They rely on systems more. Insights on the future of pest management sales and how to stay ahead of the curve. The core message here is the future favors professional sellers, not order takers. That's professional sellers, not order takers. What are our industry trends? More competition, more acquisitions, higher customer expectations, more data, more transparency. The gap is widening between companies with a defined sales process, companies relying on personality alone. What will matter moving forward? Sales training as an ongoing discipline, both residentially and especially commercially. Clear roles for technicians versus sales versus the hybrid of a technician sales rep, a selling technician. And I see a lot of that in our marketplace with companies that are in the one to one and a half, $2 million, where they're moving from technicians to having an outside salesperson. That selling technician can prove to be your outside sales rep at some point with the correct training. Better use of data to coach and not to punish. And it is about coaching. It's about focus and not about accountability. How to stay ahead? I believe you need to invest in sales training, sales coaching, sales process development, whether it be from a customer service representative, selling technician, or outside salespeople. Use AI and technology as a support tool, a consistency tool, a visibility tool, and the companies that win won't be the ones with the most tools, but the ones that use them with purpose.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Patrick. That was very insightful. So now we'll hop into our Q&A. The first question I'll ask you, I know, Patrick, you've touched on this throughout your presentation, but just if we could, share more about this. How can sales teams strike the right balance between automation and human interaction so that technology enhances rather than diminishes those personal relationships that, like you mentioned, really drive pest control sales?
Yeah, I just really believe that there's this component of human to human contact. But I think the AI, a lot of AI, and again, this is it's fairly new to all of us. And I'm one of those old guys as well. I used to use business cards to write on the back and have a deck of business cards and what have you. So the technology has creeped up and is running past me as well. But I think it handles consistency and follow up. And I think you have to strike a balance between what you're using in AI and letting that just take over and bringing that human connection with the customer. Because when if AI is just going to take over selling general pest control services, then you'll never have to worry about having human contact unless it's a technician. But I think that there's some opportunities where the cross selling of services, the cross opportunities, cross serving of customers with, if you're there for GPC and you're selling termite, AI is not going to be able to do that for you. You're going to need somebody to go there and be persuasive and convincing why they need their home protected. And the follow up, yeah, you can just turn on AI and just say, hey, I want you to do the follow up on all my customers that I've left an estimate for. But when that customer has a question about the barn in the back, but AI doesn't know anything about the barn in the back, um, that's not going to connect with the customer. So I think utilizing AI for certain situations for consistency and follow up is good, but that human interaction is critically important in the sales process, both residentially and commercially.
Absolutely. And so we have a couple questions about, what specific AI or digital tools do you believe currently offer the greatest impact on lead generation and customer personalization in the pest control industry?
I guess I would be doing a commercial for a couple of the software programs out there, and I don't know if you want me to do that, but I work with a lot of different companies who use a lot of different software programs within our industry, and some are better than others. Some are getting better. There's a lot of acquisition in that market as well. I would probably recommend that you move more towards asking your current software providers, what AI tools they have to help with the automation, with tracking, with looking at different opportunities for follow-up. I don't know that I'm prepared to say you should use X, Y, or Z in at this point because all of them have a lot of great attributes, and then some of them struggle a little bit on one division versus the other. And I don't want to get myself in any trouble. But
Absolutely.
but smart routing, automated follow-up systems, lead scoring, listening to clients or CSRs if you have a call center and they're supposed to say, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they wind up saying X, Y, Z, the AI can catch on to those things and help you. And there's also some telemarketing AI out there with some software systems that can help you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So our next question is, what is the recommended number of days after a sales interaction should there be a follow-up?
That's a great question, and it will change from one sales call to another. But however, I'm gonna kind of go, you know, a I my recommendation is to make a call the next day because most everything we do is almost paperless at some point, or we have to mail it. And I don't think too many people are mailing proposals unless somebody can see it on their tablet or iPad or what have you. But I think the follow up the following day to make sure that the customer received the information and it was handed properly because there are some systems that if you don't have the email correctly, it doesn't get to the client. So then the client doesn't even get the proposal that you were talking about. But next day follow up, and then I would go 3 days, and then maybe 2 to 3 days after that to do a personal follow up. And at that point, you can either turn it over to someone else in the office, or if you want to turn it over to AI, you can do that. If I was training my sales reps, their responsibility would be to close that thing up. And if after 30 days, depending on the sales opportunity, whether it's residentially or commercially, residentially after 30 days, yeah, I might turn it over to AI. But up until that point, I probably would make sure that my sales reps are handling that.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so now our next question is kind of more about, how do you leverage AI in, those kind of like daily sales aspects, or maybe rather than just like automating something. I was wondering if you maybe talk a little bit more about that, if that makes sense.
What is the question?
Essentially, how do you leverage AI in your day to day?
Oh, I don't know. How do you leverage AI? From a sales perspective, I'm not sure I can answer that question. Honestly, I don't know how to leverage AI depending upon, because most of the B to C uh,
Mm-hmm.
will take a long period of time to get in front and get permission to, and then provide an inspection. And I don't know where AI will help there. And from a B to C perspective,
Mm-hmm.
most of my clients that have sales rep are running 5 and 6 leads a day, and sometimes even 7 to 9. And I don't know how you would leverage the AI other than just doing follow up from previous proposals.
Hmm. Absolutely. I understand. Awesome. So now one of our other questions is, how important is it for a guy who's not very tech savvy or good at articulating themselves through emails to go in after the proposal has been made to customize and personalize it to sound like yourself?
I think, I've tried this before. Is you can write an email, and I think it even does it with Word documents. There's a little crank on the top where you can push it and give it an option to say professional. So you could type it out and then copy it, throw it in the Chat GPT and say clean this up a little bit. And then even if it cleans it up, if it doesn't sound like you, change it around a little bit. So it's just a matter of cut and paste into Chat GPT and then asking the question, can you clean this up a little bit? Put your email in, and ChatGPT AI will clean it up a little bit. But again, uh, sometimes it'll make you sound like a computer because AI is perfect. And I know that the sales reps that I have worked with for many, many years, we're not all perfect. So I would just make sure it gets closer to sound like you than having it sound like AI. And just be careful with the spacing of how it fixes your email, where if it's double spaced, it looks like AI. Make sure you clean it up so it looks like an email from you. That's the only recommendation I would have in that regard. And those folks that are not as technical savvy, just I would say come in early 2 days a week, 3 days a week, or stay a little later 2 to 3 days a week, and just learn the functions of the CRM or of AI that you're not so familiar with. because it's not really that difficult. It just takes some time to learn it. I remember way back when I didn't know anything about Excel, and I ran over to Barnes and Noble. It's not even around anymore. I'm dating myself again. Um, that I bought a book called Easy Excel, and it took me from page one, opening up a computer, to page two, to being able to turn the computer on. And before I was done the book, I was doing bar charts and pie charts, and learned AI, learned Excel pretty good. And I think you can do the same thing with AI.
Awesome, thank you. So our next question is, as long as technology and artificial intelligence are used as supportive tools, do traditional and direct methods remain the most effective solutions in sales and other business activities?
I'm going to say I'm going to say, because I have at least 10 more years of sales consulting, that the personal touch of human to human is critically important. But using AI for follow up and for proposals and generating certain aspects of the business can be very, very, very helpful. But I still am a firm believer that human connection between salesperson and consumer, that homeowner and salesperson, and the commercial commercial side of our business is going to be critically important. Um, Again, like I said in one of the first slides, AI is going to evolve very quickly. We've already got robots doing flips and jumping jacks and things like that. And gosh knows, are we going to have a truck, a vehicle that doesn't have a human in it, but it's got a robot in the back seat, and it's going to pull up to a house, and the robot's going to get out with a B&G tank, spray around the outside of a house, and get back in the car, and that's going to be the service. Who knows 10 years from now? But as far as I'm concerned, from a sales perspective, that B2B, B2C is still going to be very critical for many years to come, until again AI can create sympathy along with empathy.
Thank you. Awesome. So our next question is, what are some practical steps pest control companies can take to streamline their sales operations using modern technology without overwhelming their teams?
Um, I think the answer to that is call sales training by design, because we can match what you're doing now to what you need to improve on and clean up within your business. It's tough to make a broad answer to that question with all the different elements in and the different capabilities of companies across the spectrum of our industry. I'm not sure that um, I'm not sure how to answer that question
Awesome. No worries.
concisely.
Awesome. So then what practical and fast acting sales approaches can drive, or someone's wondering, what practical and fast acting sales approaches can drive immediate revenue and accelerate customer purchasing decisions in the public health pest control sector? If you have thoughts on that.
Well, I guess the question is, what are we doing now? I mean, we I could be in this call for 3 or 4 hours talking about the different questions that you're going to ask clients in the health sector of the business. Um, this goes back to discovery and that connection with the client on, what is the client looking for? What has been their experiences with other companies, and what are the questions that we need to ask an individual account? Because residential is a little bit kind of cut and dry. You have your pest control services, and you could go there. We do their inspection. I don't know that you have to get into a lot of discovery, but on the commercial side of the business, if that's where this question's coming from, there's a lot of different questions that need to take place prior to even doing an inspection on a facility to provide a solution. So yeah, I'm not yeah, that's a tough one to answer in minutes.
I understand. Awesome. So then someone was wondering, what is the most common reason you found why a sale does not close on the spot, and how do you kind of work around that? I know that's more of a general sales question, but
Well, I mean, quite honestly, you don't know why something didn't close unless you were there. Because a salesperson could say, I did everything that I was supposed to do, but um, what they didn't do that you wouldn't be able to see is that they didn't put their shoe covers on walking into a house, and the customer just got the house cleaned the day before and we're tracking mud on. But a sales rep would never tell you they did that. But if you were there to see that, then you would see that's why we lost the sale. Different things that salespeople do in front of or in and around a customer's house. I mean, I've seen scenarios where a sales rep would be walking around the house and he lit up a cigarette and he was smoking a cigarette while he was doing the inspection on the outside of the house. I would say you're not working here anymore. But and that could have been the reason that, or they smoked a cigarette in the truck or near the truck, then went inside, made a presentation. And it smelled like smoke, and that's what blew the sale. So you to just say, hey, this is why you lost the sale. Well, there's a lot in a sales process and in policies and procedures um, that can help you make sure you're closing more sales. So, I mean, there's just a couple examples, but I think owners, managers, and sometimes owners are great technical folks, but they don't really know what the sales process should look like. And then they're not going to go out in the field, watch one of their technicians or salespeople sell because they're not sure how to manage that. But you can't tell why a sale didn't go down unless you're actually at the property to see what was either taking place or not taking place. And there are folks who get three, four, five. I mean, I've been in a situation where someone got seven or eight estimates for a termite job. I mean, you're talking about somebody who's lonely, has no kids, they don't want to come visit them anymore, and they just want to see people. And you're one of seven or eight estimates. So your chances of getting that are one in seven. So it all depends on what happens from the time that phone call comes into the office to the time that sales rep knocks on the door, makes his presentation, and then does the follow up. So I don't think there's a one answer to say this is why that sale shouldn't be made, but it's human. It's normally human error, because most companies are pretty close, pretty close in offers, monetary offers.
absolutely. And so someone was also wondering, would you suggest making a phone call instead of sending a text when you're doing a follow-up?
Absolutely. Well, the first one should absolutely be a phone call. It absolutely should be a phone call. A, did you receive the information? B, did you have any questions? And if you didn't, when would you like to get started? So yeah, that first phone call, that first follow-up should definitely be a personal phone call from the person who gave the estimate, just in case there's a question of what happened at that house.
So thank you. And so next, what do you think the biggest drivers are of finding leads and closing sales between commercial and residential? Are there big differences?
I think most of your residential leads are going to come through SEO, word of mouth, referrals, seeing your vehicle in the neighborhood, next door neighbors. Commercial, it's going to be, from my experience with many of the clients that I work with, unless you're fortunate enough to be in a market where a lot of leads come to you, it's hitting the street, it's talking to a lot of people commercially. That's where most of the opportunity is going to come. I don't see a lot of, unless you're multi-million dollar company, like some of the bigger players where you've got all that advertising, are you going to see a ton of commercial leads coming in? It's more of a go out and generate the leads yourself.
Thank you. And so we'll do one last question here. Looking ahead, what emerging trends or technologies do you believe will most significantly reshape pest control sales over the next 5 or 10 years or so? And how do you think companies can prepare now?
Well, I'm gonna have to reach into my crystal ball here because in AI, along with technology, is going much faster than we would even have imagined. And again, I think utilizing the systems within our industry, there's a lot of good programs out there in our industry. If you're not using one of the industry standards, and you're using something completely different, I think you're going to be behind the eight ball. I can't predict a software program that's going to help both residential and commercial in 5 to 7 years. I don't know that I could. I can't look into my crystal ball and see that. I don't. I hope you understand.
Awesome. Well, yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for your time, Patrick. I really appreciate your presentation. So now we'll go ahead and we'll hear from Andy at Applause. Like I said earlier, Andy is the director of sales at Applause. So
Excellent. Appreciate that, McKenna, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing some really good insights on sales and sort of what to expect here in the modern day as things have changed quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and make some quick introductions here. So today, sort of my goal for this webinar is that you walk away with some actionable insights in terms of how you can truly take the model that's been proven for some really successful companies outside of pest control and apply it within the lens of home services to take your business to the next level. And I would say, really what we'll talk about today is what we call service-led growth, which is a new growth model that frames technician performance as the most important growth lever for your business. End of the day, your technicians are your product. So we'll talk about how we can turn every technician on your team into a reliable top performer, get them to think and operate like an owner, and ultimately lower the cost spent on needing to change other things in the business. So um, quick agenda. We'll talk specifically about how some of these tech companies that have built billion-dollar software companies, how we can take that growth model and sort of hack it for home services. So we'll take what's called product-led growth and morph that more into what's called service-led growth and using your technicians to drive your growth engine within your business. We'll also talk about what breaks down historically. There's some really good growth models that have worked historically that still do to some point. But I want to talk a lot about how what we can take the good from the traditional models, but then also how do we avoid the pitfalls of some of those things that come with traditional advertising. And then we'll also talk through sort of some key pillars of what makes up service-led growth, and some actual insights and some takeaways in terms of if you do want to implement a model like this within your business, what that looks like in practice, and an actual guide as well that walks you through how to set up your people to really drive growth based on excellent service. It all sounds nice in theory, but we'll give you some actual hard things to walk away with and a guide on that front. A little bit about me real quick. I have been with Applause now for about 3.5 years. Prior to Applause, I worked for one of the companies that we'll talk about here, which is Slack. And we'll talk about how we can take some of Slack's model and apply that to home services. And then before that, I actually helped my brother start a pest control company in Dallas, Texas, about 11 years ago, right? So the industry is near and dear to my heart, and I've seen firsthand how hard it can be to get your people to get to the level of excellence that you would expect if you were out there servicing on the customer's property. So we'll talk through all of that and lean through some examples. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about sort of this idea of taking this product-led growth model and hacking it towards what's called service-led growth. And at Applause, we sort of sit at the intersection of both software and home services. So we study them both, and what we've found is that there's some a couple key things that pest control customers are going to want and expect that you might see in a software environment as well, and how we can take some of those expectations and lessons and use them to grow your business. So at a very high level, I'll just give like a little bit of overview of what product-led growth is. So a lot of these companies here on the screen are probably software that you've either used or you're familiar with in the past. But it's this idea that instead of relying on a giant sales team or a really big marketing team to make to just get the word out about your product, that making a really great product and a really great customer experience will do more than anything to drive growth. That ultimately, if people love what you're doing and they love the product that you've built, they're going to keep on using it. They're going to talk to their friends about it, and they're going to continue to adopt it. A couple of examples here on the screen would be something like a Slack, right? Where Slack is a self-serve model. People can go online, they can sign up for it, start using it right away, and they can see how this works. There's also this idea of giving what's called like a freemium model, where people can try the product, they get hooked, and then once they've hit a certain point, they're like, oh, I want more of that, and they then have a chance to then charge cash for that. So these strategies have worked extremely well. I mean, these companies here on the screen are all multi-billion-dollar companies, and we can learn a couple of really cool lessons from that. Because obviously, pest control, we don't have a digital product that we're delivering to customers where they can test it out. But what we do have is your technicians, and they are effectively going to be the product that's walking to the customer's home, shaking their hands. And I think all pest control business owners understand that ultimately your people are the product. They are what's putting on that uniform that has your logo on there. And when they're walking in there, they're having the conversation. They're the ones that people perceive as your brand and as that experience. So we want to do everything that we can to leverage that technician relationship and interaction. And a couple quick sort of analogies and parallels here. Service-led growth is pretty straightforward. It's basically what you would expect from product-led growth, but flipped in more of a service mindset. So product-led growth means that if your product's really good, it's sticky, which means that people want to continue to use it. They've become attached to it. And ultimately, it becomes this sort of viral effect of everyone's using it. We're going to continue to share it, and it grows from there. Service-led growth is effectively the same idea, but it's driven by how good and sticky your technician is, how good and sticky the experience with your company is. The sort of the key parallel here is that product-led growth companies scale by making their product addictive and turning every customer into an advocate, whereas service-led growth companies scale by making every technician a top performer and turning every customer into an advocate. So if we can get that experience consistent, then people start to they know what to expect when they're dealing with your brand and with your company. And sort of the core idea of service-led growth is that company performance is downstream of technician performance. And that might sound really obvious and somewhat intuitive, but it's hard to nail it right and to get technician performance to be consistent. Things like revenue, retention, reviews, referrals, they all flow from how well your technicians perform out in the field. And ultimately, why does this matter? This matters because ultimately customers don't leave 5-star reviews because they like your logo or they think that your truck looks cool. I mean, maybe they do think your trucks look cool. I've seen some pretty cool reps in my experience in the pest industry, but ultimately they choose to do business with your company because 1, the technician showed up on time. 2, they listened to the problem and actually solved the problem for the customer. They treated them with respect, made them feel heard and respected in their home. But then the inverse is also true. When customers leave or when they cancel services, it's almost always because of a bad service experience. And that's really just talking about one technician on one job and the enormous impact they can have on that one job by showing up, by being friendly, by listening. If we start to multiply that by the 50 plus jobs they're completing each week, and then by each tech in your business, that really starts to scale and either to your benefit or to your detriment based on that level of service that's coming from the technician. So today we'll focus on how we can use that positive tech experience as a growth engine for your business. And before we talk through the service-led growth model, I think it's important to look at what's been done traditionally. Sort of what have been the traditional growth models that have driven the industry up until this point. And the most two common that you're going to see traditionally have been one of two things. Either, hey, we're going to spend more on marketing, or we're going to hire a lot of people in sales. And in this instance for marketing, I'm talking primarily about running ads, digital, billboards, paid advertisement, etc. And don't get me wrong, these are all great strategies that we want to continue to employ and continue to leverage to some degree. But as we've talked with business owners and looked at the data, what's apparent is that relying solely on just one or two of these strategies is only going to get you so far without you also needing to elevate service levels and really taking that customer experience to the next level. And why is that? The reason why is because marketing and advertising costs continue to get out of control, and return on ad spend is shrinking. On average, Google's cost per click for paid ads has actually increased by a ridiculous 333% in the past decade, right? So it's become, I'm sure that's preaching to the choir here. As business owners, you know better than anyone how expensive it can become for some of these ads. The other side of the coin is that customers typically trust Google reviews and social proof over ads. 54% of customers trust Google reviews more than ads, and 93% of people are going to look at online reviews before they try a service, right? That's more than 9 out of 10 of your customers are looking at your reviews before they buy anything. So this sends a really clear signal. I think everyone knows that Google reviews are important, but really sort of the learning here is that the majority of potential customers don't just want to hear from your sales reps. They want to hear from their peers. They want to hear from real customers. They want to get as close to that try before you buy experience as they can by looking at other people's experience with your brand and what's happened. So really the fact is traditional growth models, they're getting really expensive, more and more expensive every day, and less effective because they're disconnected from what customers really care about, which is that customer experience. So let's flip the coin now and look at the other side of how does service-led growth work versus these traditional models, and how does this business growth come directly from a great customer experience. There's 5 pillars that we'll walk through. The first one, pillar number 1, connect your systems for unified visibility. Now, service-led growth is fundamentally going to be about optimizing technician performance. And as we all know, you can't measure what you ultimately are not, you can't improve what you're not measuring. One of my favorite quotes here by Carl Pearson is, and it's one that you've probably all heard, is that which is measured improves. That which is measured and reported improves exponentially. Quick question I'd like everyone to sort of consider and think for a minute. How many of us all can, with a high degree of confidence, say that our technicians know exactly what's expected of them across all the metrics we're tracking related to their performance? I think the answer is not very many. As I've talked with hundreds of business owners about this, it's very few that can with confidence say, yeah, my people know exactly what's expected. Maybe they have a general idea, but ultimately this comes down to a problem with sort of tracking, visibility, and understanding. Like tracking technician performance is incredibly difficult in pest control. To start, one, you're not out in the field with your guys, right? Maybe at early stages, you're out doing jobs, but as you grow the business, you're not out there, you're not seeing what they're actually doing, so you're relying on sort of different metrics to look at that. 2, most of us are all tracking a bunch of disparate data across different tools that we're using, whether that's our CRM or telematics software, our attendance software, and we're trying to make sense of what's going on with all these different metrics that are coming on. 3rd, while there's some level of visibility for leaders, technicians almost never have access to CRM data, and when they do get those reports from their manager on how they're doing, those reports are almost always backwards looking for the prior month, prior week, rather than having real-time data where they can course correct immediately, right? So not only is this about having the data in a spot that they can see eventually, but real-time data where they have a chance to change behavior based on what's coming through. Um, so in short, this first pillar is really all about just bringing that data together from all the different systems that you use on a daily basis, creating one single view that your technicians can see how they're doing, you can see how they're performing, and it gives them a level of visibility on their performance so they have a chance to actually course correct and improve in January rather than looking at my December numbers on something that's already happened. That's in the past. I can't change that. So for service-led growth to truly work, owners need to unify all that data that they're tracking across the CRM, the review platforms, driver safety softwares, other systems, all into that single view. That breaks down the data discrepancy, makes it easy for everyone to see and be on the same page. And it gives you an idea of your baseline of how are we actually doing today. The second pillar is to, once you understand what the data is and you have it in a clean, unified view, is to set clear goals and show progress in real time. Now, again, this sounds simplistic, but this can be really difficult of knowing what to set goals for your people that are attainable, that are realistic, and that are going to drive them to improve. So with this step, you're going to start making sense of the data in a way that you and your technicians can take action on and really start to define what good performance means for your business. It's one thing to have a unified view where they can see it, but they need to understand what does good look like? What is the standard of excellence for the company? For most pest control businesses that I'm talking with, that means just picking a few key metrics and setting clear targets for each one. I think that the danger here is to try and track too many things or try to incentivize too many things, and then it sort of dilutes and starts to break down. So picking a few key ones that really matter, we'll talk about how to determine what those are here in a second, but holding your team accountable to those goals and keeping it simple. For example, let's say your goal is to improve customer satisfaction. Logical flow here would then be measure a combination of Google review ratings, internal CSAT scores, and maybe your reservice rate. Another example, let's say you want to improve operational efficiency. You're probably going to track things like time on site versus recommended time for that service. Ultimately, people have a hard time keeping track of more than 3 or 4 main items. So the main idea here is to pick a limited number of key metrics, track the progress for each for the goal for that technician, and ultimately give everyone that visibility so they can see how they're doing, not just for themselves, but how they're doing relative to the rest of the team. Where do they rank relative to their peers? This ends up ultimately driving some friendly competition across the team, and it removes that ambiguity of where do I stand? How am I doing at my job? Makes it really clear for the technicians to know how do I get rewarded and how do I get promoted within the business. That not only will help you grow your business, but that ultimately helps you retain your people and build a better culture as well. So let's talk a little bit about the third pillar. Once we've got that unified system and we've set goals of here's my expectation of where I need you to be, the third pillar that's really important here is to incentivize, put incentives in place that are going to help drive growth. So when we talk about incentives, positive reinforcement is one of the most powerful ways to drive any sort of behavioral change. But for positive reinforcement to work, it needs to be timely and it needs to be tied to individual performance. Too many companies are just still relying on annual reviews, quarterly reviews, and sort of subjective bonuses. A quick story about that. I sat down with an ops leader at one of the larger pest control companies in the nation. And what they shared with me was that when they surveyed their people, they had this bonus structure that was based on KPIs and based on hitting different business metrics. But when they asked their people how they actually got paid, they couldn't answer the question. They didn't know what actually went into their bonus. And ultimately, that led the ops leader to completely reevaluate how they were paying people because it was too complicated and it was not clear. So the goal here is to set something that's simple, that's easy to see, and that shortens the connection between the behavior and the reward that they're getting for hitting the behavior. An example of that is when your technicians can see the results and rewards right away, they're much more likely to actually adjust their effort today rather than, oh, that happened last month, I'll try to be better this month. They feel like they're performance is in their hands and they can actually change course rather than looking at things historically. The last piece I'll say on this is that instant recognition and rewards ultimately start to drive different behaviors. We see this with our customers all the time, where if you reward something like a 5-star review or a high NPS score, each time that happens, the technician starts to learn the behavior that led to that outcome, and they're more likely then to repeat it and do it again and again. The fourth pillar, once we've got our incentives in place, is to then engage your customers and ask for feedback or ask for some sort of review of your business at peak satisfaction levels, right? So the whole goal of this is not just to deliver great service, but ultimately to turn that into growth for your business. So service-led growth is about business growth. And as we discussed earlier, public feedback is, as far as Google reviews, are one of the main things that customers are going to look at when they're deciding whether or not to do business with your company. And ultimately, we need to do this in a way that makes it easy for the customer to leave a review and maximize our chance of it being a positive review without violating any of Google's policies. For example, we're not allowed to incentivize customers to leave a review. So we want to do this in a way that maximizes the chance that when we ask for feedback, that we're going to get a 5-star review that's going to ultimately help us grow our business. And what I've found in my experience is most businesses, when they're asking for reviews or referrals, they're asking days or sometimes even weeks after the job's done. But by the time it's days or weeks later, as much as we might like to think that they're still thinking about our business, they're not. Their satisfaction's faded. They're on to the next thing, or worse, that they've already forgotten the experience altogether. So a huge and core tenet here of service-led growth is identifying those peak satisfaction moments from your customers and then triggering feedback requests when they're at their happiest, or when they're most likely to leave that positive feedback. In our experience, typically peak satisfaction hits right after the technician solved the problem, but after the technician has left the home, so it doesn't feel pushy. So sort of that sweet spot of, maybe within 20 minutes of the job being completed, but without them actually being there in person, where the person feels pressured into it. So timing that request is really important here to help you capture those reviews, or get referrals, tips, upsell opportunities. That's all going to come based on that timing. And then the fifth pillar, once we've got the mechanisms in place to pay our people, they understand what's expected of them, they can see the data, there's an automation happening that's on their behalf, is we now want to take that service and turn it into automatic growth. So this pillar is all about bringing together these different items through automation. So you have this growth engine that's running on your behalf in the background 24/7. For most businesses, performance tracking and recognition are they're done manually, right? It's a manager who's every now and then handing out praise, saying, "Oh, great job," or maybe they're given an attaboy from a customer that called in. What ultimately happens is this just doesn't scale. Tracking and rewarding performance this way, it's inconsistent, it's unreliable, and ultimately it just relies on way too much manual effort, which leaves room for error. So as you grow and as you add more people to the team, it just doesn't scale, and it's not going to end up being consistent, which if the way you're measuring and recognizing your people is not consistent, then you really don't know how you're performing. That's why for a service-led growth model to work, we need automated performance scorecards that are going to update in real time without any sort of human intervention. Specifically, we need a tool that's going to consistently track the same metrics for every single technician, and that's going to keep a live running tally of where everyone stands, so they know at any moment, where do I stand, what's expected of me, and what's my earning opportunity. So the vision ultimately is to have a platform that drives automated performance tracking, pays the incentive to your employee once that expectation is met, and then turns that into growth for the business, because you're not only helping grow the business, but motivating your technicians to consistently deliver excellent work. So let's talk about an example here. I think this all sounds nice in theory, but let's talk about what it actually looks like in practice. Anthem Pest Control is a great example. Fantastic partner and customer of Applause. And like a lot of companies, Anthem's challenge was tracking technician performance. On paper, they had the data in their CRM, but in practice, it was spread all over the place. They, when we sat down and talked with them, they were effectively trying to juggle combo of Google Sheets, third-party tools like telematics software, tenant software, and what that meant was that Tyler Larson, the ops manager over at Anthem, and his team, they spent a ton of time trying to wrangle the data into one place so they could actually see what's happening across the business. But even when they did that, they knew they weren't getting the whole picture because the picture they did have was, was relying on manual inputs in some instances, and it wasn't consistent from week to week. So they realized, yeah, there's something that's not going right here. Anytime that management wanted to get any sort of understanding of how are our techs doing, it turned into a manual reporting nightmare. They ended up having to pull 6 different reports from their CRM, their telematics software, stitch them all together into this weird Frankenstein monster. And ultimately, that would go up late into the night for their team because they were trying to get it ready for folks that were on the East Coast, so they had their fresh numbers going into the following morning. Um, Even with all that effort, the data wasn't really driving the engagement they wanted. They found as they checked, technicians weren't really checking reports, managers weren't able to use the information to coach, and the process became extremely reactive and disconnected from what's actually happening in the field. In other words, Anthem was spending a lot of time managing data, but not actually improving performance, which was the whole reason that they had the system in place. So that's where Applause came in. For Anthem, the solution here was to roll out the Applause scorecards. So instead of their managers having to stay up late, pull reports, chase down data, performance metrics, they had all of this flow into one single spot that their technicians could see at any time. So every single day, when their techs would log in, they would open up their phone and instantly see, where do I stand? And not just at the beginning of the day. What Anthem found and what our customers have found in general is their technicians are looking at the app 3 to 4 times daily, where they're checking how do I stand with that last job that I just did. I feel like I did a great job of being efficient. Did that help my efficiency score? So they can really start to track their progress in real time. They don't have to wait for a quarterly review or an annual review or an email summary to know where they stand. They can see immediately, okay, where am I doing great and where am I struggling? I can see immediately, yeah, I'm doing really well at my reservice rate and my NPS, but it looks like I'm not spending enough time on each customer's house. I need to be a little more thoughtful about how much time I'm spending there, or maybe I'm spending too much for certain customers. So they were able to really easily connect the dots between individual performance and the company's goals and see their contribution. And that shift does sort of 2 things. First, it makes accountability really clear. There's no confusion about expectations or what's expected of you for your job. But second, it really helps technicians be active participants in the business. They're not just doing their jobs anymore. They're engaged, they're motivated, they're bought more into the mission of your business and wanting to help grow the business with you. And then on the manager side and leader side, this flips the script for them as well. So instead of it being, I'm in the weeds, I'm pulling all these reports, I'm in reporting hell, they get a centralized real-time view across all their locations where they can see, here's where I need to improve, here's the team members that I need to coach up, who I need to work with. This branch is doing great, this one's not. Let's maybe take some lessons here from branch A and apply them to branch B. So it helps them coach and develop their people in the right way. Last little piece here for Anthem, and this was a nice quote from Tyler. Having performance metrics right in our technicians' hands lets them see exactly where they stand and how they can improve. So again, that theme of transparency and visibility. So let's talk about, if you do want to implement some sort of service-led growth model, what are some things that you should be thinking about? First and foremost, you need to think about a scorecard. And there's about 6, 7, 8, I just did the 6, 7 joke by accident, metrics that you're going to want to be tracking here on a good scorecard. The first is going to be simple. You really want it to be simple and focusing on just a few metrics that matter, not every single thing out there that you can measure under the sun. Second is it's weighted. Not all behaviors are going to matter equally. Some metrics are going to carry more weight than others, depending on the time of the business, where you're at, the stage of your growth. Third is visibility. Everyone from technicians all the way down to managers need to be able to see the data and then see it on their phones in a way that's not hidden in the back office. It's reaching them on the devices where they're already working day to day. Next, real time. If it needs to be instant, it needs to actually drive improvement. Again, coming back to the theme of not something that's past looking, backwards looking, but current today, where I feel like I have a chance to improve my scorecard and my metrics today, and I can put in the work and I see the results immediately. And then the last three are, it needs to be aligned. It needs to be tied to a larger business goal. It needs to be tied to something that the business truly cares about. It needs to be actionable, something that the technicians can actually make a difference on, where they can change their behavior rather than something that's outside of their control. And finally, it needs to be automated. If you're still updating Excel sheets and pulling reports from your CRM, the scorecard is not going to scale, or it's going to be out there, but people aren't going to ultimately look at it. And all that work that people are putting into putting it together is going to go to waste. So the next piece, once you've figured out sort of some of these key tenets, is to ask yourself the question: what sort of business, what sort of company do I want to be? That answer determines what you track ultimately. And all three of these on the screen are important. Efficiency, customer obsession, and safety are all important. But ultimately, you need to decide what's going to be the biggest priority. If your number one priority is being customer obsessed, then you're going to really focus on metrics like NPS, Google reviews, attendance. If it's safety, you're gonna focus on things like driving score, seatbelt usage, instances of distracted driving, and then if it's and sorry, I think I missed. And then if it's efficiency, you're also going to be focusing on things like route completion, reservice rate, time on site. So really, you decide what the focus is, and then build the metrics behind that. And then once you've defined what your metrics are, and you've defined what you want to track, what your priorities are, you then need to assign weights to each of these metrics. And these can change. I talk with a lot of business owners that have different metrics that they focus on in the summer versus the winter. And a good way to think about this is ask yourself a few key questions. Number one, if I could improve one metric by just 10%, which one would have the biggest impact on revenue or margin? Two, another question: which behaviors consistently show up in our best technicians? How do we sort of take our top technician and clone them, take those behaviors and replicate it to whatever level we can? Third, what actually drives referrals, repeat business, and retention? Once you've answered those questions honestly for yourself, you'll know which metrics deserve more weight on the scorecard. You'll sort of know where the gap is and where you want to focus technician focus, and what you want to incentivize to drive growth, not just busy work. And ultimately, while scorecards are about company performance, the biggest gap that Applause will help solve for you, if you do choose to use Applause to solve for this, is giving that visibility to the employee. This is a quick screenshot of that Applause scorecard, but effectively, it's going to give employee visibility on how they're performing, what their earning potential is, and actually pay out the incentive within the app so that they get that all in the same place, where they're incentivized to go into the app because there's money in there, rather than, we've talked with a lot of businesses that have set up some sort of Power BI or some sort of other scorecard where it's just one more app to log into. And if there's not actually some sort of payment tied in there where they go into the app and cash it out, the likelihood that someone goes into the app is quite low. So one thing that's quite unique about Applause is that your employees will have a chance to log in and see how they're performing, but then also cash out their rewards. So as soon as they get paid, it's paid via Venmo directly, sort of like a Venmo style, into the Applause wallet, where they can then cash it out into their bank account. And there's an incentive to actually log in because money talks. So if you do want to learn more about scorecards, I would invite you to scan this QR code, and we can give you a guide on how to implement this for your business. Can share some of the best practices that we've seen on how to build a scorecard, how to do that with Applause. I've also shared my contact info here for anyone that has any follow-ups here from the presentation. I will leave here a little bit of time here for questions, but really appreciate everyone's time. Appreciate everyone joining on the webinar today, and would love to stop for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. That was great. So our first question is, how well do you see Applause performing in the commercial world? I'm sure some people here, work on that side of things. So definitely would love your thoughts there.
Yeah, excellent question. So actually, the Applause scorecard product was largely built for the commercial world in mind, right? So there's sort of the evolution of Applause. We have different products that some people on the call might be familiar with, sort of what we do with reviews and with customer feedback. Some of that is maybe not as relevant to the commercial world, but this scorecards piece that ties into the service-led growth very much resonates for our commercial clients because they're able to set different expectations based on what their technicians need, right? So even if you have a mix of commercial and residential technicians, you can set different time on site expectations, different number of stop expectations based on their role type, and then pay bonuses based on hitting those performances. Because as we've found in the industry, really showing up consistently for your commercial clients, it's high stakes. You often have less clients where you're doing more visits. So actually having more visibility on performance and closely tracking metrics is even more critical maybe than on the residential side because you got to make sure that you retain those big customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And someone was also wondering if you would be able to share this slideshow at any point. I'm sure if they're able to email you, you can,
Yeah,
discuss.
yeah,
So
happy to discuss that. Yeah, definitely.
awesome. Awesome. So our next question is, growth usually means more marketing spend and more reps. So what changes, first with SLG and well, service-led growth, of course.
Yeah, good question. So sort of what changes when we move from more of a traditional marketing to SLG growth, right? So I would say the biggest change that happens is you start to really focus more on the customer service experience as well as technician performance. And ultimately like the first step is really getting an understanding of how are our technicians doing today? What are the customer outcomes that really matter? And then gives you the chance to then coach and develop that from there so that you can start to drive retention, drive referrals. Um, and and really, I'm sure all businesses are thinking about this, right? I don't think anyone out there is just growing a business without thinking about customer service, but just having a little bit more of a focus on that and making that more of a priority for the team.
Awesome, absolutely. And I know you touched, on scorecards, but, where do you see the success with those?
Yeah, I would say I would say that where we see the most success with scorecards is when there's actually some sort of a bonus tied to it, where we're talking cash money and it's paid directly into the wallet of the person so they can see, you know, when I do X, I receive Y instead of it being, oh, I got one more line item on my paycheck, but actual cash going into their wallet. I would say the other spot where we see success with our scorecards product is keeping it simple, right? I think it's easy to try and track every metric under the sun, but if we keep it simple in terms of what we're tracking, limiting it to maybe, 4 or 5, maybe 6 total metrics that we're really honing in on, or maybe some sort of like combination with a power score where we've got different things that we're focused on, we avoid this temptation of pushing people too many different directions and losing their attention, right? So just really honing in on what matters for the business and then tying a tangible bonus to it that's paid out immediately.
Absolutely. Thank you. Awesome. So our next question is then, what 3 or 4 tech metrics move referrals, retention, and customer satisfaction the most, and how would you weigh them?
Good question. So we said referrals, retention, and customer satisfaction. Um, I would say, it's important to track what people are saying online about you, right? So that average Google review rating is really important. I would say NPS, that's another big thing that we focus on at Applause is asking customers how are we doing and what their experience was like with the technician. So tracking that I think is really important to make sure that you're delivering a great service that people want to refer your business. And then the other two I'd say that really tie in there towards driving growth would be your reservice rate. Like if you can keep that at a manageable level, that's really important because that means you're not having to keep going back out to solve the problem. It means you're solving it the first time for the most part, um, or on a recurring basis that you're showing up, you're doing your part. Those are probably the three that come to mind for me, I'd say.
Awesome. Absolutely. And so we have but one last question here for you. What changes with quick metric-based awards and why does it work better?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's going to be coming back to what I was saying before of this idea of changing course in the middle of a month or of a week rather than I looked at my quarterly performance and I didn't do great last quarter. I guess I'll try to do better this quarter. It's no, I can see where I stand right now. I can see that I'm in the middle of the pack on this metric. I'm going to put in some extra effort for the rest of the month and see if I can't qualify for that bonus or see if I can't win the competition for the lowest reservice rate or the highest number of Google reviews. So it's, in my opinion, that's really what changes is that feeling that employees can control their own destiny and that there's this everyone's moving in the same direction in terms of what matters to the company is what matters to the employees, and they feel this level of ownership where they can see their impact of, yeah, I got my driver safety score up to a 90 plus, and I'm getting a bonus for that. That means the company's saving money. I'm a better employee. I feel better about my place in the company as well.
Awesome. Absolutely. Well, that is all the time we have for today. So thank you so much to Patrick and Andy and Applause for sponsoring today's webinar and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you.